Hi everybody. My name is Bonnie Watson Coleman. I'm the congressional representative from the 12th district in the state of New Jersey, and I am an original sponsor of an important act known as the Crown Act. This is the third episode of sharing what the Crown Act is, what it means, what it does. I'm happy to be here with two women who are very important to the Crown Act and very important to my life. Congresswoman Gwen from Wisconsin, who's been an original sponsor and is a champion for all issues that free up and eliminate barriers of discrimination against women, Black women, and all people. And of course, the amazing Adjoa Asamoah, who is, I call her the kind of the visionary behind the Crown Act. She's gone around the country getting groups together, working with coalitions, including Dove as a sponsor of the Crown Act, bearing witness to the impact of racial discrimination because of the texture of our hair, the styles in which we wear our hair. And so I just want to let you know in the beginning that this is a conversation. So we're going to be talking to each other, with each other, and probably over each other, but that's okay. There are, because of Adjoa's work in particular, many states have passed a Crown Act. Many municipalities have passed a Crown Act, but it is vitally important that we do it on the federal level because the protections that are afforded in the civil rights laws regarding public accommodations, housing, and employment, as well as access to and benefits from any federally funded programs. We need to make sure that Black women and Black men who are wearing their hair in their natural a crown-like way are protected, are not denied access, and not discriminated against. And so there are a few takeaways that we're going to make sure that you know. This bill is probably going to move on the floor of the House of Representatives in the upcoming week. It is a bipartisan bill, and we only have one Republican co-sponsor from Nebraska, Don Bacon, because Nebraska, in its wisdom, has already passed the Crown Act. Adjoa is going to give us a lot of insight into how we got to this point. And I need you all to know that this is not just about hair. This is about ensuring that another barrier that exists just predicated upon our being Black Americans or Black anything or of African ancestry will not be a barrier to our accessibility to all of the provisions and opportunities that are available in this great country and this great democracy. So I just want my co-discussion panel here to just weigh in now and talk a little bit about yourselves and why it's so important to be engaged in this discussion and why the Crown Act, which really, I can never remember the full name of it. Creating a
respectful and open world for natural hair, including, of course, protective styles.
That's why Adjoa was on here today. I'd like to go to Congresswoman Gwen in her beautiful earrings and her beautiful outfit to just talk about why it was so important, Gwen, for you to get on this bill and advocate for it on everything that you do.
Well, first of all, Representative Watson Coleman, let me thank you for really taking the leadership on this bill and not treating it like it's some sort of frivolous sort of afterthought bill. The texture of my hair, the length of my hair has been an issue all of my life. And in fact, some of the research that Adjoa has brought forward shows us that as early as 10 years old, Black girls start feeling a sense of low self-esteem and lack of self-worth around their hair. You know, they have had to hear about having good hair and so on and so forth. And so, but what the Crown Act really is focusing on is giving the people comfort, not only in the school setting, but in the work setting too, because this follows you all the way through your career. I think the thing that really, really got on my, I think 2004 was when I really started dealing with this issue in a very intense way. I was running for Congress and I had my hair straight, had a perm, and I wanted to cut it off right then because 20 hours a day campaign, sweating in the summertime. I had no idea what my hair was going to look like the next day, because I just couldn't let it go natural. And Brenda, Brenda Bonnie, my sister, would not let me do it. She says, we got all your literature printed up with this hairstyle. You got to wear it that way. And honestly, after long, I was the only female in the race, in the Democratic primary, in the race period. And after 20 hours a day of campaigning, I had to worry about what was I going to do with this hair. Press it, roll it up. This was always an issue. And then I had a fundraiser in Washington, D.C., 100 degrees. And I was afraid to move in my hotel room for fear that I would sweat out my hair. And finally, in 2007, I heard Don Imus call the Rutgers University girls basketball team nappy-headed hoes and jigaboos. And that is when I started looking for someone to lock my hair. I just said, you know what? Since everybody knows how my hair looks, I may as well own it.
Well, Gwen, anybody that knows Congresswoman Gwen Moore is that she can come to the floor with some of the most eloquent hairstyles, but they are all natural based, and she just wears it beautifully, and it is beautiful. And when you reminded me of Don Imus, it just kind of hurt me to my heart because I was in the state legislature at the time, and of course, all of us jumped on that issue because it was so disrespectful, just so doggone disrespectful. And then there was a young wrestler who, in the middle, right before he was going to engage in his match, was told by the referee that he had to cut his hair, he had to cut his locks. So in front of everybody, that young man stood there with his shoulders back and his head moved, held high as they cut his beautiful locks down. And I wasn't his mother, but I was daggone well angry, and my heart hurt for him. And that's just not something that our children should have to go through, or that anybody should have to go through, because how you wear your hair is not an indication of your ability to do anything, from wrestle to play basketball to discover important inventions, whatever it is. It's not material. And
well, I'm going to disagree with you on that, Bonnie, because, a lot of Black women right now can't swim because we're afraid of our hair reverting to its natural state. I can't swim. And one of the reasons that I said I would let it go to its natural state, I promised myself I would learn to swim. I haven't done that, but I can now. My daughter failed swimming and I didn't even yell at her. I said, how could that be possible? She learned to swim at 3. How could she? She said, Mama, I wasn't about to get my hair wet getting in that pool.
Yeah. But that was even an issue with the Summer Olympics. There was and I think you may have been involved in the letter. I certainly was involved in the letter to the Olympics committee because someone created a cap that was large enough to cover natural hairstyles.
That's right.
And the Olympics committee just acted like it was some sort of something that was so complicated and so confusing that they couldn't figure it out right on the spot, that they had to defer to look into this matter at a later date. But you're absolutely right. And that also brought up an issue that was very racialized, very charged during the Olympics this summer.
Absolutely. That, if I may, Congresswoman, and it's so great to be with the both of you. I am obviously a fan of your leadership, and I feel privileged to share this virtual platform with you both. And happy Black History Month. We should probably say that, and shout out to Carter G. Woodson, who talks about these very issues. We know that by mere definition, the Crown Act explicitly clarifies that our hair is inextricably linked and really a part of our racial identity. And we know that anti-Blackness is something that has been pervasive, and it is a long-standing and problematic practice in this country. And so what this movement, I should say, in addition to the actual legislation, because what we're striving to do with the Crown Coalition, that I'm honored to have co-created with my sisters, AC and Orlena and Kelly, is to really ensure that we're shifting both policy and culture. So today's conversation is rooted in the policy conversation, and the Crown Act is the legislative fix to outlaw this, again, longstanding and problematic practice of racial discrimination in the form of hair discrimination. But as we're talking about now, it's also the culture. Now, the versatility of Black hair makes our hair extremely beautiful, and dare I say, something that people have envied for so very long. So it is something that has been a political statement for some people. For some, like you, Congresswoman Moore, it is a sense of both, racial and ethnic pride. And for other people, it is an accessory. I've heard people talk about their own hair as if it is an accessory. So my hair is fully natural, meaning that no chemicals, but I blew it out today. But last week I wore it naturally and tightly coiled and curly. I've worn braids with beads. I've wear twists regularly. I've rocked an afro. So it is really the choice that we are fighting to preserve and to protect when we are talking about truly outlawing this prevalent form of racial discrimination. Now, the bill that you have so graciously championed, both of you, it amends the existing definition of race in the respective codes to include those traits that are historically associated with it, such as hair texture and what we call protective styles, including the locks like you have, Congresswoman Moore, but also the braids and the Bantu knots and the twists, etc. So this bill that you all are the champions of in the House, and I have to acknowledge Senator Cory Booker in the Senate, is extending statutory protection to our hair. Now, we know that there's no biological basis for race, not the way we typically discuss it, but it does not make racism any less real. So it's really important to clarify, because some people will try to accuse you all of, creating a new protected class or doing something that you're not actually doing. So it's critically important for people to realize that you are only amending the existing definition of race where it's referenced, because it is an existing protected class. So I just wanted to, reiterate that it is the legislative fix to outlawing this form of racial discrimination, but we obviously need to move the needle as well when it comes to the culture. And you referenced Dove, who commissioned my two sisters, Orlena and Kelly, to actually produce that research that would then go on and inform this work.
Thanks, Adjoa. This legislation and the educational campaign that must go hand in hand with this is so vitally important, because even our youngest of children in schools are experiencing unpleasant responses or reactions from their teachers and their classmates, simply because of the way they're wearing their hair. And I know that we're not going to talk about a whole bunch of statistics, because statistics don't move people, but stories do. And so when you find out that Our Black girls in particular stand a chance of being disciplined 1.5 times more than any other student, and that the discipline that they experience is discretionary and is often related to what they wear and how their hair looks. And I'm reminded of like the two twins whose names escape me right now.
Cook
Who had
twins.
these, pardon?
The Cook twins you're talking
Yes.
about in Massachusetts. Yep.
Who had the beautiful black braids, stunningly done, neat, good looking, not in interfering with anything, but they were made a target. They were made a target of racism, and they were made to, or they were tried, people tried to make them feel inferior in some way. So we want our children to appreciate their uniqueness. We want them to appreciate the diversity in their hair, the things that they can do, and the beauty that it comes from within. And that's something that I know, as a youngster growing up in predominantly white schools, that people always kind of looked at us differently. I naturally have kind of straight hair. I had white kids come up to me and just pull on my hair just to say, your hair is different than the other few, Black students that might be in that school. I never forgot that. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, different. It comes out of my head just like everybody else's comes out of their head.
Well, that's inappropriate.
Yeah.
Our hair is not to be touched as if it is an exhibit. It is, again, part of our identity and something to be respected and revered even. If I switch crowns yet again, I'll just share that I spent the first half of my career working in K-12 education. And I just so happened to be a licensed therapist and was even an adjunct psychology professor. Now, I share that only in this context, just because when I'm out there ringing the alarm to support the members like you who are willing to champion such progressive legislation, and I mean progressive in terms of moving us forward progressive, and not as a lobbyist, but as an activist and someone who comes out of the Black liberation movement and still identifies as a lifelong, even racial and gender equity champion. I share that to say, because we are talking about not only the economic impact. So you're talking about a fiscal impact for adults, both Black men and women, because again, we're inextricably linked. So it disproportionately impacts Black women, but not exclusively, because it happens to our men and it happens to our children. Now you're talking about Black children being in school environments that are not always welcoming or nurturing or even conducive to what we are asking them to do. So you want our children to go to in environments that are not consistent with what we even want them to do. And then they're punished for walking in the door. And then you're telling me that my speech is wrong, the level of education of my parents is wrong, and I'm, going off on a tangent, but only because I was in those settings and had to be the person to say, no, this will not work. But when it comes to our hair, the way your hair growing out of your head cannot be deemed a violation of a school rule. And we see these Eurocentric standards of beauty in our school codes of conduct, in the student codes of conduct. So if you see a Black girl or a Black boy being denied education, which in the education world we call FAPE, a free and appropriate public education, that is a problem. Now, you talked about it, Congresswoman. Andrew Johnson, a student wrestler, being forced to make a decision that no child should ever have to make on the spot at that. And that is to forfeit a match that he had earned the right to participate in, or have his identity attacked, his locks cut, with people standing around him, egging him on. You could see the humiliation. That is inappropriate. We saw it in, Louisiana, Faith Finity being turned away from school because she rocked beautiful braids that were deemed a violation of school rules. And then DeAndre Arnold in Texas, who I had the chance to testify alongside of, who is thriving in college and who wore his hair in beautiful locks that for him, given his father's identity, was a source of ethnic pride. Being told that he could not participate in his graduation exercise because he wore locks. No, we cannot allow our children or adults, our sisters and brothers, be victimized in this way as if somehow, well, discriminated against, I should say, as if somehow our hair makes us less intelligent or less qualified. Is something that we just will not stand for. And so the Crown Coalition is proud to support the members like you who are championing this legislation. And we do it at the local, state, and federal levels, and have been extremely honored to be able to support the many members who have championed this bill.
Well,
I know. I'm sorry, Gwen.
Representative Watson Coleman, listen, I've really enjoyed this discussion. I think, Dr. Asamoah has made some really important points, about why we need the Crown Act. I just want to say, for me, it just wasn't a fashion statement. It was just pragmatic. I mean, I just, when I sat there in the hotel room and like a statue, because if I moved, my hair was going to sweat out. And my hair actually spoke to me. I was campaigning to become a member of Congress, and my hair said to me, Gwen, you're going to Congress, and I'm not going with you. And I think it's the case for little girls too. As the grandmother of 3 granddaughters, great grandmother of 2, I know that you put those kids' hair in that protective style, in those braids, because you don't have the time in the morning to get up, detangling our hair, which is very fragile, which will break if it has too much of that damage done to it. And it's so much easier to braid it up once a week and then take it down and wash it and do it. I mean, that is survival for us. Now, I'll tell you, I went to Baghdad on a Codell, and I talked to some of the Black women who were in service there. I mean, this is a place where on a good day, it's 110 degrees. Can you imagine trying to keep them straight hairdos or use lye and perm in your hair? So the women in the Army were wearing braids, and the Army said that violated the regulation. And we sent in 2014, I sent a letter and co-signed it with people like Maxine Waters from California, who's governor, as you said, was the first to sign this legislation on a statewide basis. We wrote and said, pragmatically, these women are putting their hair in a protective hairdo, and the working conditions just don't allow, unless, again, you're going to demand that these women just basically shave their heads off in order to comply with Army rules, that they can't have longer hair, because the longer our hair is, the more we need to twist it or coil it in order to manage it. So I just wanted to point that out. Mm-hmm. Yes, we're beautiful.
Yes, we
are. I'm telling you, I just can't. Dr. Asamoah, I just can't do what you do no more. I can't get up and decide one day I'm going to press it. We can do all of that with it. Twist it the next. My granddaughter does, but I don't have the time. I just got to let it go the way it go.
Well, I know at some point we're going to wind down, but we're at a very historic moment right now. We have a president of the United States who has pledged that the next Supreme Court justice is going to be a Black woman. And we have seen the pictures of some possibilities who that might be. And some of them are wearing their hair. Well, I guess they're all wearing their hair in this natural state, but some of them are wearing braids, some of them wearing kind of an afro. And all I kept thinking is that I have an 8-year-old granddaughter who is going to grow up seeing a Supreme Court judge looking a lot like her. I have a vice president of the United States that my granddaughter can look at and relate to, and can recognize that she can be anything she wants to be. So it is one thing here that we are passing legislation. And I pray that the legislation, I know it's going to pass the House. I pray that it passes the Senate and it gets to the desk of the president and he proudly signs it. Passing legislation is a piece of it, but we have to make sure that there is the adequate enforcement of the legislation once it is passed. So our work is nowhere near done. We've got a lot more to go to ensure that people aren't reacting or responding in a negative way to our opportunities, whether it's housing, employment, public accommodation, anything else, simply because of the way we are wearing our hair. So education is so vitally, vitally important here, and having role models, having male role models as well as female role models. Our children need them now more than ever. They were isolated in the pandemic. They have had experiences where they perhaps had food insecurity or some other housing insecurity or just plain educational insecurity. They need to be able to turn the TV on or open up a book or look on their cell phones or whatever, and they need to see themselves in the most productive and positive way. And the Crown Act is a piece of that. It makes me very proud, and I feel very blessed to be a part of that.
I am so eternally grateful for you picking up this baton and running with it during this session. You all referenced the history. I am forever indebted to those members at the state level who have introduced this bill. But just for context, it is also critically important to acknowledge the members of Congress who have been part of this movement, even predating starting the work at the state level. It was former Congressman Cedric Richmond who I went and called first before I started and called any state member. I went to my good friend, former Congressman Cedric Richmond, and told him that, this is something that I was going to be taking on behalf of that Crown Coalition and my sisters. It was now Madam Secretary, I should say, Marcia Fudge, who was the CBC chair when you all sent that letter to the then Secretary of Defense. So it may have not necessarily been the legislation, but you all have certainly always been at the forefront and took action as lawmakers. And so I just want to acknowledge that, lift that fact, because history is important. And I don't believe in erasing anybody in terms of their meaningful contributions to this movement. It is great that we have now Vice President Kamala Harris in the White House, who also was a co-sponsor of this legislation when she was in the Senate. And we have that support in former Congressman Cedric Richmond, who is now, left his post to go and serve as senior advisor and director of the Office of Public Engagement. So to have, two members in the executive branch who also support this, I think is critically important and is just something worth noting. So I honor you all. I am eternally grateful on behalf of the entire Crown Coalition, as well, again, as my co-creators of the Crown Coalition, Orlina, who developed the marketing strategy. I'm talking about the legislative strategy, and that's the piece that I developed and lead. But the marketing strategy and making sure that people know about this and are talking about this, that's also a critically important part of this work. So I just wanted to thank you all for your leadership on this. I am looking forward to celebrating with you all the passage of this, and keep doing the work at the local, state, and federal levels to ensure that we are outlawing race-based hair discrimination nationwide. So thank you both for your leadership and for allowing me to join you today. It is truly my honor.
Well, it is our honor having you here and having the opportunity to benefit from the work that you've done. I want to say a special thank you to Cedric, because he then entrusted the bill to me. And that bill was very important to him. And he was okay with Gwen and me kind of like picking up the mantle and running the next lap of this race. And so we've got Marsha Fudge, we've got Cedric, and we have the Vice President of the United States, and we have the President of the United States, who will be gladly signing this legislation if we can get it to him. And so I want us to pray mightily and to call up all of our senators and, encourage them to just do the right thing here.
Well, no legislation gets passed without people like you, Dr. Asamoah, without pushing it, working at both houses, keeping it alive, through various, movement of members and so on. It wouldn't be possible without your fierce advocacy and, to be able to get sponsors for this act. People who, as women and Black women, we spend a lot of money with certain companies. And so we want them to be part of our growth and development as well as we're part of their growth too. So I want to thank you for that.
I thank you. And I thank you for calling me doctor. I do intend to be doctor around August, but I'm still a doctor.
Yeah, we claiming it.
We're claiming it. We are claiming it.
Speaking it into the universe.
I love it. That's why you gotta love sisters. They will speak it into you. So I am receiving that. Thank you so much.
We see it already. So
I'm claiming it. I'm claiming it.
Okay.
So let us continue to do the work that we feel God has laid this purpose upon us, and let us know that there are steps. We'd like to leap, but sometimes we have to walk, and things can be incremental. And I pray that people understand that this is not a Republican issue or Democratic issue or an independent issue. It's not a political issue. It is one of respect, fundamental respect and protection. It brings no harm to anyone. And Gwen and I would welcome all of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to show their solidarity by signing on to what I think is a very important and monumental piece of legislation. And for our children, for our young men and young women, and for our older men and women, for anybody that wants to avail themselves of this democracy that we revere and hold so dear. That's why there is a Crown Act. That's why there's a Dr. Adjoa Asamoah. And that's why there is a Congresswoman, Gwen Moore. We just want to share the love. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
God bless. Be safe.